take such good care of me. Good evening. Good to see each and one of you here tonight. Getting a little bit of a late start, but we'll go ahead and march right through this. We're going to continue our look into Christian evidences. We've been covering this quarter, although I've only been, I guess, here 3 of the weeks. But last week we spent a lot of time talking about the design of the universe and how it is preposterous to believe that it happened by chance. But as we left off, as we closed out last week, we were actually talking about the unbelievable creation that is the human body. We were talking about the human cells and how they were designed. And it's actually here where I want to go ahead and pick up tonight, because I wanted to finish that point off. Indeed, while we stand in amazement at so many stunning scenes in our universe, I know myself, and I'm sure others do as well, we fail to stand amazed at the creation that is our bodies. According to those who do not believe in God, the human body is the result of a set of just lucky circumstances. But can a person reasonably be expected to conclude that the masterpiece of the human body, with its ingenious systems and amazing design, is a result of blind chance operating over millions of years in nature, as atheism suggests? Or would it be more reasonable to suggest that the human body is a result of a purposeful design by a great designer? We talked about this a little bit last week, but the human body, it may be considered at 4 different levels. And we have the cell level, tissue, organs, and systems. And each subsequent level is dependent upon the previous levels. The human body is composed of over 250 different kinds of cells: red blood cells, white blood cells, nerve cells, etc., totaling approximately 100 trillion cells in an average adult. And these cells come in all different shapes and sizes and perform many different tasks. The cells have 3 major parts. First, each cell has a cell membrane that surrounds it. Second, inside the cell is a 3-dimensional cytoplasm, a watery substance containing specialized organelles. And third, inside the cytoplasm is a nucleus that contains most of the genetic material, and it serves as the control center for the cell. If that wasn't enough, inside the cytoplasm, there are over 20 different chemical reactions occurring at any one time. And within each cell containing 5 major components, they can do communication, waste disposal, nutrition, repair, and reproduction. The nucleus of the control center of the cell is separated from the cytoplasm by a nuclear membrane. Within the nucleus is the genetic machinery of the cell, what we refer to as DNA. The DNA is a supermolecule that carries the coded information for the replication of the cell. If the DNA from a single human cell were removed from the nucleus and unraveled, and we've all seen pictures of this where it's in kind of a spiral shape, if it was unraveled, it would be approximately 3 feet long and would contain over 3 billion biochemical steps known as base pairs. It has been estimated that if all the DNA in an adult human were placed end to end, it would reach to the sun and back, which is 186 million miles. It would reach to the sun and back 400 times. That blows my mind. It also should be noted that the DNA molecule does something that we as humans have yet to accomplish. And that is, it stores coded information in a chemical format and then uses a biologic agent, RNA, to decode and activate it. Human technology has not yet figured out how to code things chemically. If it were written in English, the DNA in a single human cell would fill a 300-volume set of encyclopedias of approximately 2,000 pages each. Yet just as amazing is the fact that all the genetic information needed to produce the entire human population, about 6 billion people, could be placed into a space of about 1/8 of a cubic inch. Carl Sagan, we've talked about him in previous classes, but the late evolutionist of Cornell University wrote in the Encyclopedia Britannica some years ago that a single bacterial cell contained 1 trillion bits of information. To emphasize how much information that is, Dr. Sagan pointed out that if a person were to count every letter in every word of every book in the largest library in the world, which would be over 10 million volumes, the final tally would be approximately 1 trillion letters. That's how much 1 trillion is. We could go off on a different thing about our debt being 17 trillion, but that gives you an idea of what situation this country is in right now. 1 trillion is a lot. A single cell, therefore, contains the same amount of information content as all the books in the world's largest library of more than 10 million volumes. Rational people recognize that not a single one of those books in such a library just happened. Rather, each and every one is the result of intelligence and painstaking design. What then may we say about this amazing genetic code found in the DNA of each cell? The complexity of the DNA molecule, along with the staggering amount of chemically coded information it contains, proves that this supermolecule simply could not have happened by blind chance. An intelligent designer is demanded by the evidence. Many bird watchers and animal lovers have grown to love and appreciate the evident design of the natural world. And I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs here that just list 2 examples of intricate design found within the animal kingdom. We all remember having our temperature taken when we were sick, some ways more pleasant than others. But sometimes we had to hold a thermometer under our tongue for around 60 seconds. As technology advanced, however, newer thermometers came out that could be inserted into the ear, taking only a few seconds to measure temperature. Now you have the ones you swipe on your forehead, all kinds of things. But there is an Australian bird called the mallee fowl that has a built-in thermometer, which is far more accurate than the ones humans use to take their temperature. When the time comes for the female mallee fowl to lay her eggs, the male bird digs a pit in the ground and piles a large mound of sticks and leaves in the pit. He covers this pile with sand, sometimes making it as tall as 4 feet. With the sand on top, the leaves and sticks begin to rot, which produces heat, similar to what a compost pile would do. The male makes a hole in the very top of the mound, where the female then lays a single egg. About a week later, he will make another hole, and she will lay another egg. This process goes on until there are about 18 eggs in the nest. Several times a day, the male pokes his beak into the mound. He then sticks out his tongue, which is such a good thermometer it can tell or measure temperature change of 1/10 of a degree. If the mound is too hot, he removes some of the sand. If it is too cool, he adds more sand. After about 7 weeks of incubation, the babies hatch. So, considering that situation, how does the mallee fowl know the exact temperature to keep the eggs? How does it know that rotting leaves covered by sand will produce heat? How does this tongue measure temperature changes to the 10th of a degree? And it's simple. The mallee fowl was designed, and design demands a designer. Another example, the bombardier beetle is another creature that shows incredible design. It has 2 storage chambers, one on each side of its body. In one chamber, it stores hydrogen peroxide, plus chemicals known as hydroquinones. In the other chamber, it stores enzymes or proteins that serve as catalysts in living systems to speed up chemical reactions. When the contents of these 2 chambers are kept apart, they're harmless. But if the beetle feels threatened or the enemy attacks, the beetle empties the chemicals and enzymes into a central chamber in his body. And this in turn produces a combination of liquids and gases at a temperature of 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The tiny beetle squirts the boiling caustic mixture through 2 openings at the rear of his body that work like tiny cannons to bomb the attacker. Thus, the name of the bug is the bombardier beetle. The chemicals explode, the enemy is defeated, and the beetle goes on his merry way. But can you imagine trying to explain all of this intricate design by chance evolutionary processes occurring over millions of years in nature? The fact is, only intelligent design can explain how the beetle is able to produce the proper chemicals in the proper ratios and keep them separate until they are needed. The only people who have difficulty understanding the implications of design are those who have refused to have God in their knowledge. Romans chapter 1, verse 28. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do things which are not proper. Such people can say that there is no designer, but their arguments are not convincing. We mentioned this last week. One does not get a poem without a poet, or a law without a lawgiver. One does not get a painting without a painter, or a musical score without a composer. And just as surely, one does not get purposeful design without a designer. The design in the universe, from the giant universe to the tiny cell, is apparent, and it is sufficient to draw the conclusion demanded by the law of rationality, and that is that God does exist. And now we'll go ahead and get into the next series, next lesson, which was actually set for tonight, and that's the existence of God, looking at morality. It is a well-known fact that actions have consequences. It is also a well-known fact that beliefs have implications. What a person believes is the main force behind how a person acts. Everyone in the world believes that some things are right and other things are wrong. Thus, every person has some system of morality and ethics. But as we get into this evening, we're going to look at about the importance and origin of morality and ethics. And because of that, we need to do a brief definition of terms. First of all, the English word morality comes from the Latin word mores, meaning habits or customs. Morality, therefore, is a habit of following the rules of proper conduct. Ethics is from the Greek word meaning character. The standard dictionary definition of ethics is the discipline dealing with what is good and bad or right and wrong, a group of moral principles or a set of values. Ethics, then, is the system that a person uses to determine which things are right and wrong. Morals and ethics deal with proper conduct, duty, and virtue, or in short, how we ought to behave. The question now before us is, how should we behave? If concepts such as good and evil, right and wrong do exist, how do we go about determining whether a particular thing is right or wrong? At times, people do not agree on the exact way to decide whether something is right or wrong. And now we've always had people that think you shouldn't even be able to judge what's right and wrong. But however, everyone agrees that some things are right and some things are wrong. Morals and ethics are universally accepted traits among the human family. Therefore, their origin must be explained. Simply put, there are only two options. Either morality and ethics originate from the mind of God, who is the source of all goodness, or they originate from within man himself. But one thing is for certain: the choices that we are being required to make every day are becoming increasingly complex. I mean, as we go into an election season now, I've seen lots of ads coming up about abortion. Should we approve on abortion? We're not going to go there tonight, don't worry. But should we encourage surrogate motherhood? Should we advocate the death penalty? Should we recommend euthanasia? We will not be able to answer these questions and other similar questions in any meaningful way by relying merely on our individual intuitions or emotions. And neither will we be able to answer them by appealing to the past. In many ways, the problems facing us today are like those, or unlike those, that faced generations long since gone. So how will we set our standards? The person who refuses to recognize the existence of God has only one choice when it comes to explaining morality. It must have originated within man. However, since man is viewed as little more than the last animal produced by the long, meandering chance process of evolution, this kind of becomes a problem. A lion is not plagued by guilt after killing a gazelle for its noon meal. A dog doesn't experience remorse after stealing a bone from another dog. Yet man, who also is supposed to have evolved, feels both guilt and remorse when he commits certain acts that violate accepted standards of morality and ethics. If our society was based upon the concept of godless evolution, this earth would be a miserable place indeed. Dr. Richard Dawkins, the famous evolutionist of Great Britain, once admitted that believing in evolution and then acting consistently upon that belief would produce, quote, a very nasty society in which to live, unquote. And indeed it would. Some years ago, another well-known evolutionist, Dr. Desmond Morris, wrote a book called The Naked Ape, and it was about the evolution of man. That title brings to mind an interesting question. Since no other animal throughout evolutionary history has been able to locate and live by moral standards, should we somehow trust man as a naked ape to do any better? Matter by itself does not have the power to evolve. any sense of moral consciousness. If there is no purpose in the universe, which is the position that evolutionists are forced to take, then there is no purpose to morality or ethics. Unbelief, therefore, must argue, and they do argue, that there is no ultimate standard of moral or ethical truth, and that at best morality and ethics are different for everyone. We've heard this referred to as situational ethics a lot. If that were true, who could ever suggest that someone else's behavior was wrong, or that a person ought to have or ought not to have done something? The simple fact of the matter is that unbelievers cannot explain the origin of morality and ethics. Whether the unbeliever is willing to admit it or not, if there is no God, then man lives in an environment where anything goes. When the famous author Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote the book Brothers Karamazov, he had one of the characters, Ivan, remark, "If there is no God, everything is permitted." And how true a statement is that? If evolution is correct and there is no God, people can do anything they want. Thus, it is impossible to formulate any system of ethics by which one can tell the difference between right and wrong. With no way to reach a rational conclusion on what is ethical, man finds himself lost in a sea of despair, where might basically makes right, where the strong crushes the weak, and where each man does what is right in his own eyes. Morals and ethics without God is not a pretty picture. And we're going to talk here as an investigation of some different systems of morality that actually document pretty well. One of which is relativism. Relativism, for example, says that there are no universal rules for determining morals and ethics. Since all value systems are considered to be the results of culture and environment, one system is just as good as another. No one system has the right to claim it is the correct system that men should use to determine their actions. According to relativism, if a society wants to kill children at age 8 years old or younger as a means of population control, no one could say legitimately that it is the wrong thing to do. However, all humans know that some things are right and other things are wrong. And it is difficult, if not impossible, to find a society where a man is applauded for betraying those who befriend him, willfully, or by murdering his own children, or committing treason against his nation. And for this reason, very few people are willing to defend absolute relativism. Another one is hedonism, and this is a philosophy which claims that the aim of moral conduct is to achieve the greatest possible pleasure with the least amount of pain. In fact, one famous atheist, Aldous Huxley, said that he had his own reasons for insisting on a society where meaninglessness reigned supreme. He wanted a world with no meaning. He said because he felt that morality interfered with his sexual freedom. You don't have to read between the lines of such a statement to understand his point. Hedonism basically says if an action provides pleasure to the person who is doing it and doesn't really hurt anyone, then it's acceptable. But consider the ultimate consequences of this kind of thinking. Obviously what comes to your mind, sexually transmitted diseases are occurring in huge proportions all across the globe. Teenage pregnancies are rampant. Babies are born already infected with deadly diseases, such as AIDS, because their mothers contracted the disease during their pregnancy and pass them on to their unborn children. In many places, divorces are so common that they equal or outnumber marriages. Cities are filled with rapists, stalkers, and child molesters. What else will have to go wrong before it becomes apparent that attempts to live without God are flawed? Another one, utilitarianism. It is a system of belief which suggests that good is determined by what produces the greatest amount of pleasure for the greatest number of people. An accurate explanation of this view is found in a book by Catherine Tate, the only daughter of renowned British agnostic Bertrand Russell. In the book My Father, Miss Tate described what it was like to live in Russell's household, or in the Russell household, with their brothers. She commented, for example, that her family firmly believed that parents should teach a child with its very first breath that it has entered into a moral world. But as evolutionists would, her father had great difficulty defending such a position. Mrs. Tate recounted in her book the fact that as a child, she would say, "I don't want to. Why should I?" when her father told her that she ought to do something. She observed that a normal parent might respond by saying, "Because I say so," or "Because your father says so," or "Because God says so." Admittedly, however, Bertrand Russell was not your normal parent. He would say to young Catherine, "Because more people will be happy if you do than if you don't." "So what?" she would scream. "I don't care about other people." "Oh, but you should," her father would reply. In her youthful naivete, Catherine would ask, "But why?" To which her father would then respond, "Because more people will be happy if you do than if you don't." In the end, however, Mrs. Tate wrote, "We felt the heavy pressure of this rectitude and obeyed. But the reason was not convincing, neither to us nor to him." And would that rationale be convincing for any human being? Situationism. This is the idea that something is right because a person decides it is the right way to proceed in a given instance. According to this philosophy, there is nothing that is always right or is always wrong. Each individual situation determines the correctness of an action. If a sane man, therefore, decided it was right in a certain situation to kill his business competitors, how could we justifiably ask someone like the police to stop him? On the contrary, some things are always right and some things are always wrong. Situationism, it's not a worthwhile philosophy because it cannot deal with the moral absolutes that are recognized by all humans as both legitimate and necessary. And furthermore, when two people find themselves in a real-life sticky situation and one wants to do one thing while the other wants to do something entirely different, who then is right? Without any system of absolutes, who gets to choose? Determinism is the idea that a man is not really responsible for his actions. This belief claims that the long evolutionary process has instilled in man certain instincts that determine his actions. According to this concept, then, a person can do anything that he feels like doing and not be held responsible. That sounds kind of familiar. For example, if a person steals something, who is responsible? Determinism would claim that that his evolutionary past is responsible, or that his genes made him do it. His DNA composition made him do it. Yet common sense tells us that every rational person is responsible for his or her own actions. If that wasn't the case, why would we bother having laws, police, courts, judges, or jails? What a person believes, it greatly impacts how they act. And this fact can be seen quite easily by looking at the effects of incorrect beliefs concerning morality and ethics. What a terrible price we humans have paid because of our incorrect beliefs and the actions based on those beliefs. In the evolutionary scheme of things, man occupies the same status as an animal. He may be more knowledgeable, more intellectual, and more scheming than his counterparts in the animal kingdom. But when all is said and done, he is still an animal. And so the question is bound to arise, why should a man be treated any different than an animal when his life is no longer thought to be worth living? Truth be told, there is no logical reason that he should. From cradle to grave, life from an evolutionary viewpoint is viewed as disposable. And because of that, it is not surprising that we see weak or unwanted human beings being destroyed, just as if they were animals. On January 22nd, 1973, the United States Supreme Court, in a 7-2 vote, decided that the human embryo growing within a human womb was no longer is human. Rather, it is a thing that may be ripped out, slaughtered, and tossed into the nearest garbage dump. And the links to which some people go in order to justify this position, it defies description. According to Charles Darwin, weaker members of the society are unfit, and under the laws of nature normally would not survive. When a prize racehorse stumbles and breaks its leg, and even the most highly skilled veterinarian is unable to repair it, the animal is often put out of its misery with a bullet to the brain or an injection. That racehorse, however, is not someone's father, mother, brother, or sister, which is why we shoot horses. Since nature selects against the weaker animal, and since man is viewed as an animal, why should man expect any better treatment? Who is weaker than a tiny baby growing in the womb? The baby cannot defend itself, cannot feed itself, cannot even speak for itself. He or she is completely dependent upon the mother for his life. So, should it surprise us that some are willing to figuratively put a bullet in its brain and murder it through abortion, as if it were as dispensable as that broken down racehorse? Don't tell me that was a bell already. Once those who are helpless, weak, and young become dispensable, who will be next? Will it be the helpless, weak, and old? Will it be those whose sicknesses make them unfit to survive in society that values the beautiful and the strong? Will it be those who are lame, blind, or maimed? Will it be those whose IQ falls below a certain point, or whose skin is a different color? Some in our society are already calling for such cleansing processes to be made legal, using euphemisms such as euthanasia or mercy killing. The late atheist of Harvard University, George Gaylord Simpson, once wrote that morals arise only in man. By saying this, he verified, whether or not he meant to, the fact that morality is something unique to humankind. No two apes ever sat down and said, "Hey, I've got a good idea. Today let's talk about morals and ethics." But all too often, children are taught that they are little more than naked apes, and that they are intelligent enough to figure out exactly what that means. Convince children that they evolved from animals, and they will act like animals. With guns blasting children, some as young as 10 or 11 years old, bearing a grudge or wanting to settle a score, walk into school hallways, classrooms, and libraries, shoot until they have emptied every round from all the guns' chambers, and watch gleefully as shell casings, teachers, and classmates alike fall silently at their feet. Then parents, administrators, and friends congregate in the middle of the bloody aftermath and wonder, what went wrong? Yet why should we be shocked or even enraged by such conduct? According to the laws of nature, only the strong survive. Children have been taught that religion is an outward sign of an inner weakness, a crutch used by people too weak and cowardly to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. So why then should we be at all surprised when they react accordingly or even violently? After all, the law of nature is kill or be killed. The truth of the matter is that only the approach which states that morals originate in the mind of God is consistent logically and internally. Only the approach that calculates God into the universe can provide an objective, absolute set of morals and ethics. But why is this the case? And we're going to just go ahead and stop there. We'll pick up there next week. I thank you for your attention. We'll hope to see you next week.